yours fine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul and steal your boom break. Spooky, scary skeletons won't speak with such a screech. You'll shake and shudder and survive when you hear these zombies shriek.
It's supernatural and shine what's all the buzz. We want to socialize, but I don't think we should.
It's not spells, no big mind, you're so insane. Sticks and stones will make your bones so let me scream. Spooky, scary skeletons run way through
Happy Halloween, everyone! I hope you all are excited for this review, because today, me and 3 of my co-stars are going to be looking at the Halloween-themed DVD, Thomas's Halloween Adventures. And these 3 lucky co-stars of mine are SplendidEngine21, SirDuke95, and my newest co-star, NostalgiaDude1998. Say hello to the people, my fellow kooks.
Hello. This is SplendidEngine21 back once again.
That was short.
Hey guys, it's SirDuke95 and I'm very excited to be reviewing another release with Tay and the rest here on Gilligan's Island. Thomas's Halloween Adventures is a release that I always wanted as a kid. It's something that I just absolutely adored. I remember going into a Kmart with my dad and seeing the original Wooden Train bonus gift pack of the DVD, and I desperately wanted it. There was something about that orange caboose, and orange is my favorite color. There's something about it I just can't put my finger on. I just absolutely love it. And Halloween has always been my favorite holiday, and so that was something that I always wanted growing up. I never got it until I was an adult, but that mystique and intrigue of such a unique and specific release tailored around Halloween, it just always stuck with me. However, will this release live up to those very high expectations and memories that I had for it as a kid? Let's find out together.
Greetings, fellow fans of Tommy the Choo Choo. It's been a while since I've been involved in anything related to the Cerulean Tank Engine. I was given an invitation to review this release, and I could not turn it down, as this release is very interesting for the most part. So I'm excited to be doing this review, and hopefully more to come in the future. Going to be fun, delving into some spooky kooky shenanigans.
Alright, well, I'm excited, I know you guys are excited, my co-stars are excited, so let's take a look at the history. Thomas's Halloween Adventures was first released on DVD by Anchor Bay on August 29, 2006. This was included with both the thick and slim cases. Let me just say that when I say I was late to this so-called Halloween party, I was extremely late, as my family stopped buying anything new Thomas for a very long time. So I roughly didn't get to see this DVD until my brother got his own copy in late 2010, if not 2011. So that was about a 4 or 5 year gap that we had to wait just to see this. Anyways, the second release of Halloween Adventures was distributed again by Anchor Bay on September 4th, 2007. An added feature with this slipcase was that they added a bit of glitter to the cover, which does look very pretty, but it will leave just a tiny mess afterwards. Then, Anchor Bay had re-released Halloween Adventures for the 3rd time sometime in 2008. This case, however, had a Happy Halloween banner stretched over, but as you can see, the middle photo is much lower and just about cuts off Percy. They honestly could have done a better job editing this one. Later on in 2009, Lionsgate had re-released the DVD, and on September 21st, 2010, both Lionsgate and Maple Pictures released Halloween Adventures on a double feature with Percy's Ghostly Trick. This is probably one of the best and one of my personal favorite double DVDs. The combination is just too perfect! Then after a 5-year hiatus, Universal re-released Halloween Adventures sometime in 2015, and within the same year, a double feature was released, but this time with Thomas Gets Tricked. If you ask me, I think this combination is very corny. It's so bait-driven, it's not even funny. Just because Tricked is in the title does not mean in any way it relates to Halloween. How lame do you have to be to come up with that? And lastly, on August 28, 2018, Universal released the DVD one final time, but now with a glow-in-the-dark slipcover. It looks cool, but answer me this. Why is there a CGI Thomas on the front when this DVD has nothing CGI related on it? Seriously, are these companies really that lazy? Come on, give me a break. And like always, you can also find the Wooden Train bonus pack for this DVD that comes with a special Happy Halloween car. I don't get why they had to release two different packs, as there's really no difference. One is a regular, one has glitter. Why did they do that? I have no idea. Okay, well that does it for the history. So now let's take a look at the episodes. So Thomas's Halloween Adventures features 11 different episodes and 2 music videos, with the stories told by George Carlin, Alec Baldwin, and Michael Brandon. Scaredy Engines, Haunted Henry, Thomas Gets Tricked, Thomas Percy and the Dragon, Diesel's Devious Deed, Percy's Ghostly Trick, Toby's Discovery, Gordon and the Gremlin, The Fogman, Bad Day at Castle Lock, and Percy and the Haunted Mine. Just a quick note, how we're going to split this DVD up between all of us is really simple. Each of us are assigned a number of episodes, all chosen at random, and whatever episode is next, that person will only give their thoughts and so on. Because if all 4 of us gave our thoughts for the same episodes, and knowing I've covered most of these already, we'd be here for hours. So with all that out of the way, our first scary episode is Scaredy Engines. Jeremy, take it away.
Say what you want, but this is by far my favorite Halloween story in the series. And before you guys shoot me, let me explain that Percy's Ghostly Trick, or Ghost Train for my UK peeps, is overall my favorite spooky episode, but it doesn't take place on Halloween, so therefore it doesn't count for me. If I'm not mistaken, Scaredy Engines might actually be the first official Halloween-themed episode. Took them 6 seasons to make that happen, but at least we got some quote-unquote spooky episodes in the past. Anyways, I really enjoyed this episode for multiple reasons. Thomas is being a little bastard as he can be, but this makes it up really well, and he actually learns a valuable life lesson. Anyone can be scared of anything. He at least got what he had coming, so I think the story executed it well. Though Season 6 doesn't have great visuals, this episode is great. The smelter's yard looks so eerie here, and the music makes it look so damn creepy. One very cool touch that I find genius here is the echoed parts of when the characters talk in the smelters. It gives such a unique take on the characters actually speaking.
Careful the ghost engine doesn't get you, Thomas said. There's no such thing as ghosts, snapped Percy. Please, sir, he said. I'm sure Thomas wouldn't mind staying. Of course not, Thomas boasted. I'm not a scaredy engine.
This was the first and unfortunately the last time that they did this, not counting Magic Railroad. I love how they make Duck a main character here, and I also like the supporting sign he gives to Percy. It reminds me of their duo in Season 2 and 3. Overall, this is a fantastic episode that has some amazing visuals, great music, a nice little message, and is my personal favorite Halloween story in the series. 10 out of 10.
Haunted Henry could be best summed up in one word: atmosphere. From the spooky lighting, to the eerie fog effects, to the creepy music, and expert cinematography, Haunted Henry uses every element of filmmaking like individual bricks in the construction of a mighty building. And you can feel this construction taking place in the story too. Out of all the spooky Thomas episodes, this one feels the most like a slow and suspenseful climb to the top of a roller coaster. And once the audience reaches the top of that hill, they're in for the ride of their life. Of all the episodes of Thomas ever produced, I think Haunted Henry would make everyone's top 50, and many people's top 25. On a visual level, it's absolutely stunning. In terms of production design, I don't think the sets for Thomas ever felt more real than they do in this episode. The spooky forest that Henry travels through is just absolutely jaw-dropping. In terms of cinematography, the 16mm perspective shots from the camera that's mounted on Henry's train as he pushes through the forest are just so intriguing and atmospheric. It really helped set that uneasy tone. It almost feels like the perspective of a person lost in the woods at nighttime. It really helps add an extra layer of depth and artistic expression to this episode, which is already phenomenal on its own merits. On a story level, it's truly remarkable as well. Not a single line of dialogue is wasted in this episode, and the story is very compelling. And did I mention how much I love Baldwin's voice as Old Bailey? I just love that he randomly made him sound like some old prospector for no apparent reason.
I tried to warn you about the viaduct. Why didn't you pay attention? I'd like to operate that old station. If you let me, I promise I won't spook Henry again.
In terms of Season 5 episodes, it's not one of my favorites, but I can certainly appreciate just how well it's made, and I still really enjoy it. I'd give it a 10 out of 10.
So a lot of you are aware that I previously reviewed the US Ringo Starr dub of Thomas Gets Tricked some months back for my very first VHS review. But now how do I feel about the George Carlin dub for this episode? Honestly, I don't feel any different. The story is still, in my opinion, nothing really all that special. As I've mentioned before, not a lot actually happens here, apart from Thomas getting his payback from Gordon. But there's really nothing else to rave about other than that. Even so, I still believe this is one of the many overrated episodes from Season 1. I don't get the high praises for it. And I also can't believe I'm saying this, but I much prefer listening to Ringo in Season 1 compared to George. And this is coming from someone who praises the hell out of Carlin. I don't know what it is, but it just feels like this season fits more to Ringo, if you get what I mean. George is very hit and miss throughout Season 1 and 2. The enthusiasm is definitely there, don't get me wrong, but there are some episodes where Ringo is slightly better. This episode is one of those few times. Now, as for it being on this DVD, it literally makes no sense. Again, all because Tricked is in the title, it automatically means it deserves a spot. No. That's a very piss-poor way to choose such an episode for a Halloween-based DVD. This story is in no way under the category of spooky. I think it was just a very cheap and lazy attempt to get this episode onto another DVD. The story itself still remains as an 8 out of 10, but as far as it being on this DVD, I'm giving it a 2 out of 10. The only two things that slightly save it is that it's restored footage, and this is the only other way to get a US dub with Carlin. Other than that, it should not be on this release. I don't think I've mentioned this as of yet, but Dragon was the very first episode I watched when I first got into Thomas. This was around the time when both Season 3 and 4 were roughly at their peak, so these were the two seasons that I mainly grew up with. For my starter episode, it was a banger. Although between the screeching owl and the creepy dragon music, it did set me on edge just a little bit. But that's a story for another time. As for it being on the DVD, I think it's a pretty fun choice. Call me nuts, but I think this is a better balanced Thomas and Percy story compared to some others we've had. Obviously, our main focus is set on Percy being stuck in the siding, and then it just slowly shifts to Thomas with his dragon load for the carnival. And throughout the remainder of the story, it really doesn't lose its main focus. It's actually written really well. However, normally I would not classify a dragon to be under anything Halloween related, as dragons don't really give off a spooky kind of vibe. They may look scary at first sight, but they're not really that level of scary. But taking into account the visuals, music, and the kooky looking dragon prop, I'd say this episode just barely gets a pass for being on this release. Overall, while this episode is not entirely spooky, there are some things that do potentially save it. A proper ranking would get a 10 out of 10 from me, but for this DVD, I'm ranking it an 8 out of 10.
I'm just gonna say right off the bat, why the hell is this episode on here? I mean, it's not a bad episode or anything, but it's not a Halloween or scary episode at all. First of all, this is the middle of the Duck and Diesel trilogy, so for people that never grew up with Better Late Than Never or even Thomas Comes to Breakfast, like me, wouldn't even know what's going on. Second, the fact they change it to Diesel's devilish deed makes absolutely no sense. If you're going to add a story with Diesel, you could have added an episode like Flower Power. That easily could have worked, since this is technically a hit era themed DVD. This is one of the few episodes I know they just threw in here because of the title sounding scary. Like I said, it's not a bad episode. I actually quite like it. It's a funny story with some little iconic lines from the engines arguing at the sheds, and the Duck and Diesel arc is great. But yet again, this is the middle of that trilogy, and this episode isn't scary at all. As far as an episode rating, I give it an 8 out of 10, but as far as it being on the release, I give it a 5 out of 10.
Ah, yes, Ghost Train. What an episode to begin my reviewing with. As everybody who knows me well, Percy is my favourite character of the franchise, and as most Thomas fans know, this episode is an icon story for a character such as Percy. Almost every single release or compilation involving Percy has this episode included. It feels almost criminal to not include it in the notable list of episodes for him. Whenever Ghost Train comes up on any release I'm watching, in my head I'm basically cheering because I know I'm in for such a brilliant 4.5 minutes of entertainment. This is surely one of my favourites from the franchise. Although I'm from the UK and don't necessarily have that much history with the release of Thomas's Halloween Adventures, I will say that I do have a very big history with the episode itself, thanks to the UK VHS tapes of The Deputation and Ghost Train, of course, as well as many other releases in addition to that. So I had quite a wide exposure to this episode, which I am thankful for considering how great it is. I love this episode because it has such a personality to it. It just screams spooky. No pun intended there with the scream. Whenever somebody mentions Halloween-themed Thomas episodes, of freaking course this one will be a no-brainer to mention because it literally has that persona to it. What makes up that persona is the constant mist and fog thoroughly during the episode, as well as the eerie, low-toned, ominous soundtrack, portraying it in a means of making it look like the monster, or ghost, getting closer and closer to frightening its victim. That being Percy getting one over on Thomas for calling him names previously in the episode, which is the utmost of satisfaction, because no one disrespects the Lil Bean, known as the Purr, and gets away with it. Although the tone is supposed to be ominous, there is also a sense of harmless fun and wholesomeness to it with the way Percy cheekily goes about playing his prank on Thomas. And the fact Toby instantly went along with it too is just priceless. Just goes to show that Thomas really gets on everyone's nerves enough times for them to get back at him with a prank. It also makes me chuckle to think Percy turned his accident with the lime into something he could use to his advantage against someone else. It kind of adds to the positivity and childlike nature of his character, which is how I came to enjoy Percy's character overall. Another funny instance is when Toby hints to Thomas that Percy could have possibly perished in his accident and become a ghost, while Thomas is there not really giving a damn. Yeah, Thomas, you are such a kind and loving friend, aren't you? Not.
Hey.
Ghost Train / Percy's Ghostly Trick is such a treat of an episode to watch. Ringo Starr and George Carlin sounded like they had a whale of a time recording their narrations for it, which I do not blame them. Mike and Jr., as always, composing a soundtrack which goes hand in hand with the appearance of what is on screen. An absolute banger of an episode. 10 out of freaking 10. I see we have a sing-song to review now. Boo! This song stinks. Just kidding. Get it though? I said boo because it's in the title. Puns are still relevant in this day and age, right? Right? I'll see myself out. With that silly tomfoolery out the way, I must say this song, I feel, is a very underrated track. I don't see many fans give it the light of day and they just shrug it off as meh, which kind of disheartened me as I wouldn't have anybody to share my enjoyment with. I have a very strange history with this song, as of course, me being from the UK, we only received one song out of the season 6 bunch to actually be released on home media, that being Winter Wonderland, which is abysmal if you ask me. My first exposure to Boo Boo Choo Choo was via the OG days of 2006, 2007 YouTube. Gotta love that 240p quality. So I was roughly around 8 years old when I first saw it, which I feel worked out better in my favour in terms of understanding the meaning behind the lyrics of the song itself. As a 4-year-old, I probably would have been like, huh? As an 8-year-old, I unfortunately got some exposure to some creepy videos online or watching television shows that were too scary for viewers of my age demographic, so of course, that led to me being a scaredy cat when it came to being in bed alone at night. So, upon listening to the song enough times, certain lyrics stuck in my head whenever I got scared whenever it came to being in the dark alone. Especially the lyrics within this section of the song.
Really nothing's changed, it's just the same, just daylight turned to night. But something moved in the corner, a shadow crossed the wall. He closed his eyes, counted 10, and remembered the wise old owl.
I loved the calming technique they included here, with closing your eyes and counting, as I do that even now at times when I'm feeling overwhelmed with any type of anxieties that happen to occur within my time. When I attempted it, even back then, it did help because it would show me that time was going by and nothing was happening to me. So it finally made me think that there really was nothing to be scared of, which is exactly what the song was trying to teach its audience, which is, don't be afraid. I love that the song is obviously spooky, but also stays on a type of level to a point where it can still come across as friendly to whoever is watching, as they are truly trying to send their moral message across without scaring children in the process. The spookiness and derpiness of this song kind of go hand in hand, as yes, the song can sometimes come across as slightly patronizing and babyish, but without a little bit of cheerful friendliness in there, then any hopes of getting the don't be afraid of the dark message will go out the window, as they would be afraid of the song, and then the song would have no message to give because the child would be afraid of it. So that approach would just end in a lose-lose, which is why I argue that the childlike nature of the song is justified. Deep reviewing aside though, this song does slap, especially the lower tone variant that can be heard via the Train Yard Track CD. Definitely gets those toes tapping, that's for sure. I have plenty of positive memories via this song, and it truly got through to me as a kid, which I commend it for. It may not have worked for everyone, of course, but hey, everybody has different experiences and opinions on things, which makes life all the more exciting. I would place this song probably in my top 15 Thomas songs. A solid 9 out of 10 from me.
This is going to be biased, but this song slaps. It's funny because though in terms of lyrics, it's one of the weaker ones, but it somehow gets stuck in my head and it's such a banger. See, my first exposure with this song was on this DVD and not Thomas and the Jet Engine. And I've had some friends tell me that when they first heard this song or even saw it, they were getting nightmares and it freaked them out because of that owl. I will say, the owl looks a bit weird, and it's perfectly fine if you were once freaked out by this music video. Sorry, Tay.
Fuck you!
But I never was, believe it or not. I actually find it quite catchy, and it leaves a pretty good message saying that everyone can be scared and not to be afraid of the dark. It's one of the catchiest songs in my opinion, and I even used to rewind it over and over again on this DVD. The lyrics maybe seem all childish or overused, but I don't care. It's a great song. I wouldn't say it's one of the best in terms of lyrics, but it's a guilty pleasure for me. One of my personal favorites for sure.
While not being one of the strongest entries into Season 5, Toby's Discovery is a story that I find still has a certain amount of charm and appeal, and it certainly has a lot worth talking about. This episode has a sense of adventure and mystery that's absolutely contagious to the audience. We get to see sets and locations on the island of Sodor that we've never seen before. From the castle to the mine, the wild goose chase this episode leads the audience on is just a ton of fun. However, this episode is certainly not perfect on a writing level. For one thing, how and why do Sir Topham Hatt's grandkids have some weird old map that they found, I guess? It's not some made-up map that they drew, it's an actual real map of the area, and they decided to bring it to the beach with them. Like, what kid have you ever heard of that brought a map to the beach? Like, not just buckets and shovels, but an actual historical map.
Now then, where are we? I have here a map.
Where the did they get this from? And it's even weirder that the signalman they meet later knows where the castle and the mine are, but his boss, Sir Topham Hatt, has never even heard of them, and he's the superintendent of the railway. It just gets weirder the more you think about it. Secondly, I have to point out the signs at the junction, because they're kind of ridiculous. The line is abandoned and overgrown, but randomly at the final junction, there are just these very specific signs that point to the castle and to the mine. Seems kind of unrealistic if you ask me, especially since they don't seem to be overgrown like everything else in the area. And lastly, we have to discuss Bertram. The story Thomas tells about the old warrior is so shoehorned into the story. Like, it's such a bizarrely specific name for a ghost. Like, you're coming up with a random ghost story to scare a friend off the top of your head, and the name that first pops into your head is Old Warrior? It's just very weird. You could argue that Thomas knew this name because he had talked to Bertram while working at the mine, but that doesn't explain how Toby himself never saw Bertram while working at the mine. He's just right out there in the open. How did Toby not see him? It's just the more questions you ask about some of these things, the more bizarre and more enigmatic this episode becomes. It doesn't all add up. However, despite all of the things I've just said, I still really like this episode. Giving a character like Toby an adventurous story instead of the typical choice like Percy or Thomas really makes this episode more memorable and likable than it could have been with those characters. A fun and intriguing mystery and adventure that's arguably flawed, Toby's Discovery is still a wonderful treat for any Thomas fan. A solid 7 out of 10.
Oh, where the hell do I even begin with this episode? For starters, I'm not exactly the biggest fan of this one, and this is going back as far as my childhood. And no, it's not because it's a Gordon episode either. There are other reasons. The story, for one, doesn't make any sense to me. The plotline of these so-called gremlins is so bland and vague. So a few little mishaps occur throughout the yard. Gordon not ready on time, the turntable getting stuck. If you really wanted to count this one, the cow delaying Thomas. These are normal occurrences that could happen at any given time. And it's not like these gremlins play a major role in the story. 'Cause they don't. The plot just shifts from them and, oh look, we have a new character in the story. Let's focus on them now. This story is just all over the place, and I can't stand when some of these Thomas episodes do that. Another reason why I don't care for this is because I feel like this sort of wasted Dowager Hatt's first appearance. She's supposed to be this big important visitor, but they barely do anything with her. She has one line at the very end, and most of the focus is on her dog. And I don't know where this came from, but why does she have this sudden need to change her dog's name? And don't even tell me it's because she said.
Well, after today's events, I think I'll rename him Gremlin.
What the hell was so drastic about your big day that you just had to do that? Now, as for it being on this particular DVD, it's another that does not belong. All because of the gremlin in the title. Mythical creatures that don't have anything to do with the story itself, and another poor way of trying to bait people. Pathetic. If I were to rank this properly, I would have to at least give this a 6 out of 10. But because there is nothing spooky throughout this whole episode, I'm ranking it a 1 out of 10. Only because I feel like Alec Baldwin did a pretty solid job narrating. I love his Dowager Hat voice, and I also love the fact that now everyone feels the need to point out that the bull has a pair of balls.
What the fuck are you looking at?
And also, kudos to Alec for giving us another sex noise.
Oh!
Other than that, I really couldn't care less about it.
This one is interesting, to say the least, for both positive and negative reasons. I have plenty of memories with this story, as per the self-titled UK VHS and DVD release, which I enjoyed a lot as a child, but my opinion is somewhat different from how I viewed it as a younger version of myself. First off, I must speak upon the elephant in the room here, but I do not think this episode was a great choice for the release itself. I think when choosing the episodes, they must have really rushed into it with this one, as they see fog and must instantly think, oh yeah, that'll work for a Halloween release. Yet it's clearly stated in the episode that it takes place in winter, and Halloween, is in autumn. And it's mentioned at the beginning of the episode too, so they seem to have slapped this in here just to fill a space. However, despite that flaw, it does not affect how I feel about the episode itself. I enjoy the silvery greyish colour tones with the visuals in this episode, making it seem like it would snow at any minute, and it gives off a cozy Christmas is approaching vibe to it. And when it gets to the frosty time of year around, say, late November to February for me, it makes me want to just pop in the Fogman tape and chill out under a blanket. It's very good in a sense of setting an atmosphere, that's for sure. And for the story itself, it's fine, but there are things that are questionable. I do admire the seriousness of the dangers this episode portrays, in addition to the safety aspect of the episode too, with the importance of Cyril's job with the detonators, warning the engines to slow down because of the potential hazards of thick fog, leading the engines to be more cautious with their speed as to avoid involving themselves in any kind of incident. Whereas the particular aspect of the episode I find kind of dumb is the fact that Sir Topham didn't think of the potential risks of placing a freaking foghorn beneath a rocky mountain? Not the smartest move to make from the literal CEO of the entire railway, but proceeded to do it anyway, leading the foghorn to be destroyed in the long run regardless, rendering his decision to replace Cyril completely pointless. To me, it's basically like a don't fix what's not already broken kind of thing. I'm aware Topham mentioned Cyril needed a rest, but there is such thing as hiring a new employee to take over instead of wasting time and resources on a device that didn't even work to its potential anyway. It really is silly when you think about it. But that aside, I don't let it ruin the episode completely, as I do still get some kind of enjoyment out of it, due to the excitement and peril of Thomas's crash and Toby's close call, as well as Topham finally not being a dumbass and rightfully letting Cyril return to his duties as normal. Alec Baldwin's narration of this episode kind of just exists to me. I do not care for it, not one bit, as I don't for most of his Season 6 narrations. It's not even the fact that I'm a Brit. When doing reviews, I do not let narration bias get in the way, as I judge on story and characters, not the way the story is told. Alec was fantastic in season 5, however, but here he's just... It sounds like he completely lost the passion he had for his career in the show compared to how he was a few years prior in season 5 and of course Thomas and the Magic Railroad. As for Michael Angelis, his voice is just a bundle of joy in this season. I feel like season 6 was Michael at his very peak. The amount of energy that man put into his performance was like a grenade of excitement, which is why I enjoyed season 6 as a kid as well as now. If ever I need to let off some steam, season 6 is my go-to for sure. In conclusion, this episode is enjoyable to some extent, but there are some aspects of it that I find very foolish, but I don't find those gripes to be too overbearing of my enjoyment, so I give this episode a 7.5 out of 10.
When Tay and I were randomly assigning episodes to people for this review, the one I dreaded I'd get was the US dub of A Bad Day at Castle Lock. And as fate would have it, that was the very first episode the wheel chose for me. While this episode is only dull and mediocre in the UK dub, in the US dub, it's nearly an offense to God.
He's cute. He's not. He's cute.
However, allow me to twist the plot for a moment and direct most of the blame for this not to Michael Brandon, but to Robert Hartshorn. While Brandon's not great as narrator, he gets most of the heat, while Hartshorn's terrible music for season 7 gets entirely overlooked by fans. I've been a composer and musical arranger for nearly 10 years at this point, and I can tell you that not only is the music Hartshorn wrote for this season bland and forgettable, it's very rushed, lazy, obnoxious, and oftentimes fails to accurately convey the emotions and events being portrayed on screen. To help prove my point, compare how this scene from Bulgy Rides Again was scored by Hartshorn to the version that was scored by Mikan Jr., which both feature Brandon's narration. First, we'll start with Mikan Jr.
Get out of my way! He overtook Trevor. Bulgy swerved. The hens woke up. The passengers panicked. And Bulgy's driver lost control. The hens were frightened. They flapped. They squawked. Stop! Cried Bulgy's passengers. We want to get off!
And now, let's listen to Hartshorn's music.
Get out of my way! He overtook Trevor. Bulgy swerved. The hens woke up. The passengers panicked. And Bulgy's driver lost control. The hens were frightened. They flapped. They squawked. Stop! Cried Bulgy's passengers. We want to get off!
See how much emotional nuance was stripped out of the scene with Hartshorn's music? He played the scene as some kind of dumb comedy and deprived it of any suspense it might have had. Hartshorn's patronizing and dumb-sounding score makes Brandon's narration sound patronizing and dumb. Whether it's a good performance or not, it doesn't necessarily matter. Hartshorn essentially changes the emotion of the words that Brandon is saying. And while Brandon may not be a fantastic narrator, some of Brandon's weaker line reads are made that much more obvious and cringeworthy by Hartshorn's god-awful score.
He's cute. He's not.
He's cute. He's not. He's cute. He's not. He's cute.
He's cute.
He's cute.
Alrighty, just shut up! Thank you.
He's not.
With all of that being said about Hartshorn's music, how well does this episode stack up in terms of story? Not so great. Essentially, Donald and Douglas are tasked with taking a train of goods to Lord Callan's castle adjacent to the castle lock, which is supposedly home to a monster. When they arrive at the castle, they are trapped by a landslide until night. Later that night, they see Harvey pushing the breakdown train towards them, and they think it's the monster of the lock. And then they realize it isn't, and then everyone is happy-dappy-dandy the next day. The end. Wow, what a nothing story. Compared to some of the episodes we got in the first 5 seasons, this episode is so boring, a pale imitation of the past, foreshadowing how bad the show was going to become. Even with some of the weaker episodes in terms of story, like Haunted Mine, there were at least some interesting visuals to give some reason to justify the episode's existence. We don't even get that in Bad Day at Castle Lock. Should I even mention how weird it is this is on this release? It's the only Michael Brandon episode. It has different music, and it's just stuck right in the middle, and it really doesn't have that many scary moments in it. It's just there, and there are way better episodes that could have been put on this release, like Stepney Gets Lost, for example, or Duncan Gets Spooked. But no, they went with Bad Day at Castle Lock, probably just to shoehorn Brandon in there because he was the current narrator and it was contractually obligated, or something like that. I want to find something positive to say about the episode to cap this review off, but the US dub just doesn't give me much to say in its favor. A boring story with bad narration and even lazier music. If you don't press the skip button on this episode, I'd be amazed. I'll give it a 3 out of 10, and I think that's being very generous.
I know this episode gets a lot of mixed opinions, but I honestly quite enjoy this one. To me, what makes this episode stand out for me are the visuals and music. Like I stated before, Season 6 has some bland visuals, but the episodes that are involved with being eerie, they go all out in this season. As an overall episode plot, I can see why people aren't a fan of this story. For one, the mine isn't actually haunted, it's just old. Though seeing the building sink into the ground is cool as hell to see, I find it odd how Percy's driver and fireman didn't hear it the first time. It's clearly right next to you. Another issue I somewhat have with this episode is the US dub itself. Baldwin honestly sucks in this one. I feel the only time he really tried was when Percy's driver was shocked at the building sinking. But when Percy was scared, there was no emotion whatsoever.
Double bouncing buffers, shrieked Percy. He was so scared, he lurched forward and rammed the freight car. Naughty gnomes, cried Percy.
Also, the fact he doesn't give Donald and Douglas Scottish accents is so off. If you're talking about the UK dub, it's miles better. But since this is a US release, we didn't get that good treatment. But despite its small flaws, I do actually like this episode. The visuals and the music really make it stand out to me. Not the best quote-unquote spooky episode of Season 6, but it's still a good one. 8 out of 10.
Alright, well, I think we're just about done here. Wait, what? Oh no, we are not about to cover this song. Skip, please.
Yeah, okay.
So, what do the four of us think about Halloween Adventures? Matt, start us off with your thoughts.
Well, we've examined the release down to the smallest atom. However, does it pass the nostalgia test as an adult? Does it ring the same way as it did as a kid? I would say it does and it doesn't, because it has some really great episodes on it, but it's also really bizarre. Like, the non-Halloween episodes that are on this release, from Diesel's Devious Deeds to Thomas Gets Tricked, and the other ones, kind of put this release in a box of its own. It's unlike anything that came before it. It's hard to say that Anchor Bay knew what they were doing when they were putting this release together, because to have Thomas Gets Tricked on here, it sounds like a spooky title, and a person that wouldn't know Thomas would put that on the release, thinking it was Halloween related. But then they put Toby's Discovery on here, a name that doesn't suggest anything spooky, but definitely has a ghost story at the end of it, which means they had to have known that to put this one on the release instead of Stepney Gets Lost or Duncan Gets Spooked. So it's just confusing what logic they used to put this thing together. But in a way that kind of makes it fascinating and really interesting. I think this release is definitely worth having for your collection. It's such a wacky and wonderful thing that I can't not recommend it. You just have to get it if you don't already have it. Just as long as you skip Bad Day at Castle Lock when you're watching it.
Alright, Jeremy, what are your thoughts?
So what are my personal thoughts on Thomas's Halloween Adventures? Well, it's actually one of my favorite DVDs, believe it or not. Now, I know some of the episode selections make absolutely no sense. 4 of the episodes don't even deserve to be on here. If you really want to see a really good version of this DVD, I highly recommend you going to check out my buddy Brendan Hargis for his reimagined version of Halloween Adventures. He swapped out the episodes that had nothing to do with spooky or Halloween season and replaced them with some actual eerie episodes, including one from season 8, making it seem more fitting for a hit era release. But the reason why I like this DVD so much is not only because I grew up with it, but it's really good to watch around Halloween, even if 4 of the episodes doesn't make sense to be on here. I don't know about you guys, but I love coming back to this one. It's a very unique DVD too because it features all classic series episodes, but it all has theme team transitions and the season 8 intro and end credits. It's very weird, but actually pretty nice at the same time. It's something that the DVDs here never really done much before. So do I recommend it? Absolutely. I'd say if you want to buy this DVD, buy the original 2006 DVD print. It's the best version. Besides, it's Anchor Bay. Anchor Bay is always the best. If you really don't care about certain variations, you can always find a brand new copy of it from Universal on eBay, or maybe at your local store. It was reprinted last year, so it's kind of strange that it wasn't reprinted this year, but you can always find it. It's a very common DVD.
And now, Matt, tell us what you think.
So, before I give my final verdict on this release as a whole, I want to mention something I've realised. I've noticed a pattern when it comes to some titles in the release. They tend to use the key words in episodes that have titles which include words that are associated with Halloween, or anything on the spooky side. For example, Thomas gets tricked, linking that towards the activity of trick-or-treating. Diesel's devilish deed, altering a word in the US title from devious to devilish, because again, what do people dress up as or use as decorations for Halloween? Devils. Gordon and the Gremlin. Gremlins are of course creepy fictional creatures, but the episode only uses gremlins as a metaphor for things going wrong, which I feel is very misleading. The Fogman is lastly another one that doesn't really make sense to have on the release, but I already covered that earlier in the video. Now here is how I would have viewed the episodes in the slots that would have made more sense. In the Fogman's place, I would have slotted in Stepney Gets Lost, as it keeps to the theme of fog, but also sticks to the theme of a frightening endeavour, associated, of course, for the topic of Halloween. Thomas Gets Tricked, I would replace it with none other than Halloween itself, from Season 8. It would make some sense to have some hit era episodes in here because they utilise said era's intros and credits for it, so why not? Diesel's Devious Deed I would have changed to Flower Power, as it still heavily involves Diesel in the plot, and having it literally take place on the night of October 31st, so no brainer there. Lastly, I would replace Gordon and the Gremlin with Duncan Gets Spooked, as it is still a Season 5 episode, and also mentioning a made-up entity being a ghost from Rusty's story, and then the made-up entity of the Gremlins. I do not know how this episode was not included initially on the release. Very silly on their part. I am very on the fence with this release for my overall stance. Some episode choices are great for the theme it was going for, but at the same time, there are a few episodes on there that would make people think, wait, what? I would recommend this release for anyone looking for an episodic spooky compilation, but I also would not recommend it due to the dumb choices they make with some, so I'm very 50-50 here. So my overall complete rating for the release itself would probably be a 5 out of 10. Half positive, half negative. It sits slap bang in the middle.
After analyzing all the episodes, this DVD is something else. I'm okay with it for the most part, but I feel like it could have been done so much better. The concept they had going was not a bad one at all, but in the end it was poorly executed in terms of episodes. A majority of these are really good choices, but some others? Why? As I explained with something like Gets Tricked, the title gives off something like a trick-or-treat vibe, which does not happen. Devious Deed is the second that suffers from this. To change devious to devilish was a horrible way to make the title sound spooky. And meanwhile, nothing Diesel does to Duck here is scary in a sense. Gremlin is another questionable one for this release. People depict gremlins as this mischievous or creepy looking creatures, and this story is thrown way off with that in mind. And lastly, with Fogman, I get where they're coming from with the fog giving everything an eerie and chilling sort of look, but this episode had none of that. Hell, as much as I'm okay with this episode, I don't even think Bad Day at Castle Lock should be on this DVD. Even though a monster is mentioned within the story, it doesn't really carry on with the plotline. The creepy visuals literally only last for about 20 seconds, and it's never touched up on again. I would not classify this episode as a spooky-themed one. I don't know who picked these episodes, but whoever it was, obviously didn't think about this thoroughly. Like the others have said already, had they replaced the first four with Duncan Gets Spooked, Stepney Gets Lost, Halloween, and Flower Power, and if you were to also say remove Castle Lock from the roster, this would have been a perfect release. For those that are looking for some of their favorite spooky episodes on a compilation DVD, I would recommend getting this, but for those who are looking for something that has, at the very least, a perfect concept, then I wouldn't bother with it, because some of these episodes will raise a lot of eyebrows in confusion. And that does it for this review. I want to thank Matt, Jeremy, and other Matt for taking their time to join me on this fun little project. And I want to thank all of you for watching, and I hope you all enjoyed. And please feel free to look at some of my other reviews in the playlist down in the description. Before I close out this video, I did want to talk about one little thing. As of November, I will not be putting out any VHS or DVD reviews, as I've got bigger plans in the works. I'm going to be meeting one of my very best friends from online for the first time, and they'll be spending Thanksgiving weekend with me and my family, so I will not have the time to work on any reviews while they are here. I will, however, try to get one or maybe two shorter videos out before they come, and the reviews will not continue until early December. When I do return, because it will be close to Christmas, I'm going to be covering some of the CGI DVDs. And what better one to start off with than Santa's Little Engine. See you guys soon, and I hope you all have a happy Halloween.